Hi, my name's David Coe. This is my final project from my final class at Middlesex. I couldn't be more happy about it. The case study I chose is called Family of the Job. It's on page 156 in our text, Human Relations and Police Work. A little bit of a background. I think I was the first one who contacted the professor on which case study I wanted. It's very personal to me. I kind of lived through something very similar, so it hit me when I read it. I specifically looked for something like this, and when I found it, I jumped at the chance. So, like I said, the case study is called Family of the Job. It portrays a police officer and his struggles between the job and his family. It speaks of how the job can overwhelm not only you, but can overwhelm your family as well. The job in this case study is that the detective, it's a police officer who got promoted to detective in the property crimes unit of his police department. A detective's job, just like any other police officer, is very demanding, calls for long hours, which in turn means time away from home, in this case, which is the exact problem. The case begins with the detective coming home after a long 12-hour stakeout. The detective comes home to find that his family is gone. He's puzzled because he can't remember where they are or anything like that. He quickly realizes his son's school play was that night. He was also supposed to attend a PTA meeting with his wife that he naturally neglected to. He forgot because of his long 12-hour stakeout. The stakeout took all of his attention, completely forgot about his family, his responsibilities at home, his wife, the PTA meeting, his son, his school play. When his family arrives home, his son goes right up to him and says, "Daddy, where were you? I was expecting you at my play." He says, "Daddy had to work. He's very sorry and he'll make it up for him." His son says to him in a sad manner, "You're always working." His wife is obviously very naturally unhappy with his not being at the PTA meeting or a school play because she knew it was important to his son. The case goes on to talk about other distractions that he has being a police officer, which can be a wide array of things. In this case, it's his friend wanted to help him obtain an LTC, a license to carry a gun permit. The case goes on to say how that took time away from his family. It says how before he was in the property crimes, now he's in the property crimes unit. He was previously in the traffic division. The schedule in the traffic division was more structured, whether it was a Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, no weekends, no holidays. He hated the job. It wasn't rewarding to him. Now, he's a detective in the property crimes division, and he actually thinks he's solving real crimes, really helping people, really doing something that he finds productive and rewarding. He loves the work, although he clearly sees that it's negatively affecting his family. He knows that it's negatively affecting his family. He sees that his wife knows. He sees things like not going to his son's play where his son is clearly seeing that now. Finally, the wife at the end of the case study reaches her limit. She came home. She tried to call. Her husband wasn't there. She tried to call him. He was out assisting his friend getting the license to carry. He didn't have his phone on. He had shut it off. She had no idea where he was. His partner had called the house looking for him, having no idea where he was. So she naturally got very worried. She freaked out. She didn't know if he was okay. She didn't know if he was hurt, where he was, what he was doing. He finally comes home. She confronts him and says, "Where the heck were you?" He explains what was going on. "I was helping my friend get his license to carry. I told you I was supposed to do it." And she basically breaks down and she says, "I can't take much more of this." She fears that her family's falling apart and that it's come to a point where he has to choose between the family and the job. She saw how much it's negatively affecting his relationship with their son, clearly his relationship with his wife. She threatens to take their child and leave. It's like I said, it hits home to me a lot. This is a very common struggle with police officers. Every cop in every town, in every state, works really weird hours, takes long hours away from home, and it's it's very hard to integrate all the things that you need to have in your life, personal time, time with family, your job, everything else, with a very limited schedule, with a very unflexible schedule, working the weird hours that we do. Personally, when it comes to this case study, I'm guilty of this to a degree. We as police officers get wrapped up in our work. It's clearly a very important job. It's something that most cops don't just do. It's a part of who we are. We can get misled, and it can become not only a part of who we are, but all of who we are. There's a lot of, I mean, we take the dangerous assignments we never say no to, the overtime hours that we never say no to. It clearly has an effect not only on ourselves, but on our families in a different way. The thing that I remembered personally, the second I finished this story, was in my academy, a long time ago. I remember one of my senior drill instructors preaching that family needed to come first. And somewhere along the way I forgot for a little while. I got back on track, and I realized that family came first no matter what, and that's where I am now. I think the biggest part of why there's such a high percentage of cops that have problems within their families or divorce or anything like that is basically the stress of the job. Like I said, we work tremendously long hours. We have shift work. We're working midnights, then we got to be back at 4. So we're working till 8 a.m. I go home, I go to bed, I got to be back at 4. So for 24 straight hours, I have a hard time fitting anything else in except my job, because I need to sleep. I need to be on top of my game for my work. The people we deal with are obviously, we don't deal with the best people in the world. We deal with drug addicts and murderers and rapists and terrorists and from nuts to soup, everything else that's in the world. With our job, it's extreme highs and extreme lows. 1 second I'm going 100 miles an hour to a call, trying to stop a husband from beating his wife. The next I'm sitting there for 4 hours, and then I'm back at 100 miles an hour because there's a terrorist, or there's a rapist, or there's something else that you gotta go 100 miles an hour to, and the highs and lows are difficult to deal with. People think of shootouts or the big calls that are the only thing that we deal with that affect us. Going to an elderly person's home that can no longer take care of themselves is a tremendously sad thing to see. Going to seeing a little kid that is not taken care of whatsoever is tremendously hard to see. So it's not only the big things that you see on the news, it's things that we deal with every day that negatively affect us. When I was in service training a couple weeks ago, we get recertified for defensive tactics every year. And one of the instructors hit me with something that I never thought about. He said, you think about PTSD and you think about Iraqi veterans, Afghanistan, people who go overseas. But every single cop has PTSD to some degree. And cops will be the first one to tell you that we don't talk about our feelings. We don't feel comfortable doing it, it's just not within us. The biggest thing to do with that PTSD from all the drug addicts we see, everything else that we see, is the only way to help is to talk about it, to get things out, which I know I personally have a hard time doing, and I know all of my friends have a hard time doing it. The chronic stress of the job, which I found that is defined as it numbs sensitivity. You can't stand to see the misery that you see on a constant basis. You stop feeling bad for people because you personally can't take it anymore. It's your mind's way of coping with all the stuff that you see, so you no longer have to deal with feeling awful for people, because it's just a constant struggle within yourself. Which in turn naturally hurts other people, your family, your friends, everybody else, because you're so shut off that you just don't see things anymore. The stress that police officers deal with is a stress that nobody can understand unless you're a cop. You see things that people shouldn't see. You hear things that you shouldn't hear, and you know things that you shouldn't know. A personal example of mine is something that I should have never seen was about 6 months back. I saw a 37-year-old kid that hung himself with a belt from his doorway. I was the first one to walk in on it, and or the second one to walk in on it, and it was horrific. But you learn to deal with these things because you have no other choice. And that's a stress that we carry that's not easy to deal with in any way, shape, or form. A number that I found staggering was, and they told us about it in the police academy, that sergeant from Fitchburg did when he was preaching about family, was the divorce rate among the average American people is 50%, which is astronomically high. 1 out of every 2 marriages end in divorce. For a police officer, the number jumps to 70 to 80%. 7 or 8 out of every 10 get divorced. And that's directly, in my opinion, related to the stress of the job, us not knowing how to deal with things, us not being able to get our emotions out, which then breaks down the family, especially with never being home. It's very hard on a spouse to deal with something like that. I found an article that had eight tips on how to deal with, or how to be strong in a law enforcement family, and it really hit home, so I wanted to share them. Number 1 is talk about how much you want to share about the job. I can't tell you everything, nor do you want to know everything, so set the limitations. Discuss whom you share that information with. Obviously that's between me and you. Decide how much off-duty work is permissible. You're away enough. When you're supposed to be on days off, do you really want to spend your entire day's work? Have an off-duty carry plan for your weapon. Some cops carry 24/7, I'm being one of them. Some don't. Get used to unusual hours going to events on your own. Like I said, we work tremendously weird hours. Sometimes, as hard as we try to get things off, we can't get a Christmas off, we can't get a birthday off, we can't get a holiday off. Embrace other police families. They're basically your family. They're the only ones who understand the struggle that we go through and that you go through on a daily basis. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I'll talk more about that later. Be confident in the strength of your relationship, because that's the one thing that's going to get you through. There was a video that hit home that I wanted to share, but I can't. I'm going to attach the website to when I upload it to YouTube. It's basically about how cops don't have a work-home relationship. It's not conducive to each other. The studies from CBC News out of Ottawa, Canada, but it's dead on to every cop that I've ever talked to, how I feel, and everything that I'm talking about here. There was the people I interviewed for a reason. They went through similar situations to me. 2 of them are law enforcement officers that work with me, who went through either a divorce or a custody battle with their child. And the third person I interviewed was my ex-wife, because it's important for that point of view. None of them could the first person I interviewed related with both the husband and the wife, the police officer and the wife, because he went through a similar struggle that I do. He put his job first when it shouldn't have happened, much like at times I did. The other ones said they could never relate with the wife. The husband. It was just family was first, and that was it. That was the theme throughout when I talked to them.